Brandon Martinez, come on up. All right, I've gotten to know, I've known Brandon and his brother Justin, who's also in our apartment investing industry for several years now, but I would say that my relationship with Brandon has really picked up over the last year, where we're getting to know each other first as human beings, and then I've gotten to know and respect his area of specialization, which is CapEx, which he's going to speak to today, and our topic I think was maximizing investor profits through CapEx efficiency. So, capital expenditures, maybe that's a bit of a dry topic for some, maybe it's not. Maybe you salivate at the idea of hearing about CapEx, but it's an essential component of a successful apartment investing project. As I said, I'm thrilled now to be partnering with Brandon on a current project because we typically work with CapEx specialists, but Brandon's going to talk a bit about this in his presentation, but what are the roles there? All I'm going to say is what an advantage it is to have a CapEx specialist that's part of our GP team on our current project. And we also have a property management specialist that's part of our GP team on our current project, which is obviously a tremendous advantage as well when you can have your partners that have a vested interest in the deal and you're not simply working with them just as vendors. Without further ado, as I said, I've really ramped up my relationship with Brandon. We're now partnering on a project together. In addition to being a multifamily investor, Brandon's real area of specialization is capital expenditure products. I'm going to let you tell you a little bit more about that here, but here's Brandon Martinez, and write down those questions because we're going to take some breaks for Q&A.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate the introduction. Just wanted to say that I'm very grateful to be invited to this. Known Aaron a long time, but haven't gotten the chance to work with him yet. So just really excited and grateful where I'm at right now in my career and my background and how I got started. So I was trying to look for a job. That's how this all started. And I was working for my brother's single family. We did flips. But I wasn't really part of the equity side. I think he was paying me like $10 an hour at the time, so I was really making the dough, So I ended up just helping him with the flips, and I guess what that was is project management. That's kind of how I got my first start in project management. And bear with me, this is only my third time speaking to a crowd, and you guys are by far the biggest one. And luckily, when I get nervous, I produce a lot of saliva. I don't know if that happens to anybody else, but at least, it's better than like getting sweaty or something. So I don't know, but it can affect me a little bit. So and so that's why I learned project management. And then wasn't making enough money there, so I took a door-to-door job one summer, knocking on doors. Went to the biggest houses I could find in North Texas, and knocked on the door of a construction owner, owned a big construction company, and instead of me selling him, he sold me on working for him. So, but I'm glad he did because later I joined a group, very prestigious construction company, so I started learning construction management, not just project management. And it was there that I really enjoyed, more of the client-facing. Taking care of people's real estate or their businesses and working with them. That was my favorite thing to do, is build those relationships up. However, with anything I do, I like to kind of dig deep into it, and I like to learn. I'm like a little detective, and so I just always wanted to understand the numbers of everything. And one day, I stayed late. I forgot something at the office of this big construction company, and I went back in, and the upper management and the owners were still in there, and I overheard them talking, and I heard my name, and I was like, no, come on, you don't need to be listening to that, but I couldn't help it. I was like, what are they talking about? And for that next 20 minutes, what I heard them say just completely changed my view about at least this construction company, and I don't need to repeat what they said, but I left there just really just thrown off in life, and I was like, well, let me go try out some other construction companies. Maybe they're not this way. And sure enough, I just one after the other. It was just, corruption and profit driven, and which is fine. I got to make money, but just their lack of care for their clients and their people like us. They just didn't, I just didn't want to do that. And so one of my mentors is like, hey, are you going to go start your own construction company? And I didn't want to do that either, but I think that was the moment where I said, okay, I want to do something where I can protect these clients that own real estate, that own businesses, from contractors that are, out to take every dollar, right? And so I set up a business where I'm a consultant, but no longer working for the construction side. Now I'm working for you guys, like the investors. But now I know everything the construction company knows, so I'm like their, a private detective, helping them hack the system. And so that's how I got into my business in terms of what CapEx Partners does. But it wasn't until I got to multifamily with my brother and Brad Sumrock that's when I was like, maybe I can take this idea and put it over into multifamily. And that was back in 2018, and since then it's done really well. That's kind of how I got here today. I do passively invest myself, so I've done 8 passive investments since 2018. That's kind of how I got started. I'm just one of those people that needs to learn a lot and feel comfortable with something before I move really fast. And so I could have jumped into the GP side, but I just wanted to keep learning and feeling comfortable. And at one time, while I was working, through my business as a vendor for multifamily, I just realized I don't know enough, and that's a hard thing to admit to yourself. But that's when I went and took a job with Omni Group, Brian Amos, and I learned as much as I could working under him. He's a really smart guy. And then so I'm like, okay, I got the construction part down. I got the due diligence side down. I think I'm ready to start doing deals like as a GP, right? And then take the next step. So a couple years later, fast forward to, I got 4 deals over 820 units. And if we're able to close on this next deal, that'll be over 1,000. So looking back, because I know a lot of people have this question, but looking back, I probably could have done it a lot quicker, a lot faster, just been more aggressive. But I also wanted to enjoy it, I wanted to enjoy the journey, and I didn't want to jump in anything too early. So I'm kind of glad with the pace that it went. So passive, and then became a GP. Okay, and that brings us to today's topics of discussion. So as we go through each topic, after each one, I'm going to pass it off to Aaron to see if he has any feedback or something to say about that topic, and then we'll roll it over to you guys if you have any questions. Good? Cool. All right, so the 3 topics are missing data multifamily investors should be aware of throughout the due diligence process. What should you consider before deciding who will manage the capital improvement projects? And why taking your meds is crucial for maintaining a high-performing real estate business. So if you guys will take out your phones, this is the important part, you don't have to, but this will help you follow along. What I'm going to get into is very detailed, and we're going to be talking about due diligence. And if you'll scan this, you'll get this due diligence checklist and an asset intel checklist, which I'll explain that in a moment. So when you get in there, you will have to fill out your information, and in about 60 seconds after you submit, you'll get a text with this, and you guys can follow along. Let's talk about your average due diligence report. And the reason I put Brian Fantana from Hankerman in there is because these due diligence reports work 60% of the time, every time. Okay. All right, so if you're looking at that checklist, a basic due diligence, when you call them out, they're going to have 11 categories. And so if you're thinking, why should this matter to me? Now, if you're wanting to be a deal sponsor or are a deal sponsor, of course this should matter to you because you're going to probably be in charge of due diligence and getting this information, and your investors are going to want you to as well. It's very crucial. I like the phrase that deals are made when they're bought, not when they're sold. And those are the numbers you want to get. You really want to get good at forecasting. So those 11 categories, the reason that your basic due diligence company kind of found this happy medium where they're not giving you 1,000 details and they're also not giving you barely any, that's cheap, is because they have, just like any other business, you have to find a benchmark, right? So a company will say, hey, we have this product. It's really cheap, so everybody's going to buy it, but it has no value. Then we have the super expensive product, and it's too expensive, but it provides a lot of value. So the due diligences that you're seeing are kind of right in the middle, if that makes sense. So the reason I say that, I don't want y'all thinking these due diligence companies are doing anything wrong. They're out there to help you guys out. I mean, they really are. And so this is just the way their business really functions the best. But however, what has happened over the last couple years is that as I go through my own personal GP deals, or if I have a client for CapEx Partners, this literally every single deal that I've seen, over 40 at this point, there's something that comes up along the way, and we get a notification from the property manager, or the city flags us, or a maintenance guy sees it, and they call me and they go, hey, what about these water shutoff valves? The city is telling us we got to replace them all. We don't have to replace these all, right? And I'm like, yeah, you do, if they're not working. And why is that? So because that has happened so many times, one day it just clicked. I was like, maybe I got to stop relying on the due diligence report alone. Maybe I got to do my own homework. And I keep screwing my own deals over. Not a lot, a couple $100,000, but the deal still went well. But it was because that's when it's your job on the team, and like everybody kind of looks to you. They're like, hey, what happened here? Why didn't we budget for this? So that was my learning curve. And then that being said, every real estate deal is different. And so as you go through that list, it doesn't mean you're going to see that on every deal. And every property is different. You're not going to see that on every property. I was just trying to think of everything I could possibly think of. The missing details from each category. So of those 11 categories, I'm going to pull this up here. Yeah, so as we go through these, and I'm not going to go through them all because we'd be here all day. So I'm just going to give you a couple from each category so that are missing. So the good news is that these categories are covered. The bad news is the report you get might miss some of these items. So if we're starting with foundations, what they do, a due diligence company will walk out and a guy will eyeball everything. So he's going to be walking around and he's like, all right, I got a crack here, got a crack on the wall, there's a tree root going in, you see the sidewalks, the subfloors are uneven, and then he's going to guess how many piers he needs to put under that building in order to keep it from moving. And that has never been accurate. So we'll get that number, let's say it's 50,000. It always ends up being way more or way less. The proper way to do foundations is to have a foundation technician come out and take actual level measurements of each building. He's got to go into almost every unit. And what he's doing, he's seeing where the current levels are, not so we can make a decision today. You don't want to make a decision on foundations day one. It's so that 3 months from now, 6 months from now, you check those saved levels. And if they're not moving, your foundation's not moving. So it is now still, so to that point, you don't need to do foundation repairs. You just need to patch everything up that's been affected. Or if it's still moving, now you're in trouble. Now you gotta budget for those repairs. So that's why I bring that one up, because just eyeballing foundations is just not going to get it done. So somebody from your team, or hire somebody to come out, make sure that that category gets taken care of. Next one is plumbing. Okay, I'm sure this is everybody's nightmare if they have C-class properties. So plumbing on the domestic side, what happens with that is your due diligence guy will basically just take pictures of the boilers, and you'll get a sticker. You see a picture of a sticker, and you know the year it was built. They're not really allowed to go in, take it apart, inspect it. The seller's not going to allow you to do that. So what you have to do is you have to go in and you have to test the water temperatures at every unit throughout the whole property. Once again, time-consuming, expensive, but it's important because if you have brand new boilers, like we do at this property or project that Aaron and I are working on, brand new boilers, like, why are they brand new? Like, should I just go, okay, check? No. It's like, why did they just put in brand new boilers? And so as I did my digging, I found out that it's not the boilers that's always the problem. It's the system that's pushing the water throughout the property that's the problem. And so you keep throwing money at a boiler when it's not even your problem. That's another thing that's not going to be under due diligence report. And just to not go too long, I'll just cover one more thing here. Plumbing sewer lines. So everybody knows that they camera the lines. They go underneath so you can see each line. Well, what happens? Some buildings don't have clean outs, right? So it's like, what's underneath there? It doesn't matter. We just can't get underneath there. So you'll see, deal sponsors just like overlook it. And yeah, there's no way to get down in there and see what kind of condition it's in, but here's what you can do. Here's what you can do as the investor. Hire a plumber to go into the unit, remove the toilet, and then they can scope the lines. Why due diligence companies don't just take that extra step? Like I said, once again, time consuming and it's probably expensive for them. Because remember, they're paying these technicians to be out there. So they're spending money too, right? So now you have every single line cameraed. You know what you're budgeting. And then more importantly, a map. You want to have a map, this is so crucial, of where all the plumbing lines are and which way they run. You don't want to wait till you're 3 months into your ownership and we can't locate a leak because you can't locate the line. And now you're scrambling to locate the line and water's going everywhere. If you know where your lines are, it's going to save you a ton of time. So like I said, I can keep going into each one, just kind of picking them apart. Some are not as bad as others, but for most part, there's a lot of stuff missing. And so Ron Burgundy's there because he's basically saying, once I took over a property and I didn't have all this information, it escalated quickly. So here's 3 categories that aren't in the due diligence report at all. So these are just completely missing. So this is going to be entirely on your team to get this information. So drainage just kind of gets overlooked. It's also hard to scope because you don't see it unless it's storming. Like when you get the big heavy rains, somebody on your team that likes to be out in the rain needs to put on a raincoat and umbrella and jump out there during a super big Texas storm and get some footage of it like you're the news station. And then, so now you can see what the issues are with drainage and why is drainage important. Foundations, it affects the foundations and your retaining walls. So think of the structure of your entire property as well as the structure of your buildings, and over time it just gets chipping away at that. And the average drainage quote on a due diligence, when I get them, since they're not on the normal report, is about $50,000 to $100,000. So it's like, where's that going to come from? So safety and security, this is probably my second favorite one, is so important and kind of overlooked. Most people go in and say, hey, we've already have cameras at the property. They don't even check to see if they're working. And quick tip on that, you can actually get the local police department to tap into your surveillance system. And then you can post signs saying the Addison Police Department are monitoring this. That's pretty cool. Most of them will be on board with that. But yeah, safety and security has gotten big for us lately. What we've realized is there's companies out there that provide an asset protection plan. I know we have an insurance guy here today, and so kind of affects insurance as well. So an asset protection plan basically goes and looks at every nook and cranny in your entire property, and it says, okay, are the first responders, how do they respond, how fast they respond, firefighters, what happens if there's a natural disaster, what happens if there's a crime or a gunman. I mean, this is real stuff that happens at these properties, and so a lot of this, I think I have some property management people here today. Anybody? No? Nobody in property management? What happens is it should be in their handbook. So I found this out a couple days ago. It should be in their employee handbook. What our job is to make sure they know what that is. They actually read it, and implement it. We have to ask them, and if they don't, we need to get that done. So, gates, surveillance, security, really turning this property into feeling safe. And I guarantee not only will your reviews go up, but more families will want to come live there. And that's a big one. So the last one is sustainability, and that's not in your due diligence report if you're thinking about going solar. The reason nobody's going solar is because it's like a 6-month project. You have to literally chip away at that for months to make it work and finally get it installed. And if you're going to wait till you close on a property to start looking at solar, it's not going to happen. And so getting a quote for solar, the first day you can, like the moment you know you're going to win a property is the goal. And that way it becomes feasible. Some other sustainability, one of my favorite ones I'll just talk about real quick, probably moving a little too slow, is low maintenance landscaping. Has anybody heard of exerscaping? You all know what that is? So you go to Arizona and you're like, where's all the grass? It's because it's hot. And honestly, here in Texas, it's either really hot or really cold. So I don't know why we don't do this here, but We're actually going to build one of these at our new property right at the front entrance. It's going to be a nature walking path enclosed by an 8-foot board-on-board fence, and we're going to get a local muralist to come paint it and really make it pop so that it attracts the traffic driving by. And not only is it not going to cost us any water, because we don't have to water low-maintenance landscaping, it's all desert plants, but you also reduce the landscaping cost for that area. So the 3,000 square feet of that field, we call our landscaping company and say, hey, can you take this off your scope, and can we get a price reduction? Because now you don't have to do that. So just some fun little ways. I can talk forever on sustainability, but you get it. None of this stuff is on the report. Finally, we'll get into the asset intelligence report. Was anybody able to pull this stuff up on your phones? Just a couple of no's and yeses. Okay. Wish somebody would go out and help. Want to help them? I'm kidding. Okay. So I call this the asset intelligence report simply because I needed a name for it, and I didn't want to call it a due diligence report because I'm over here saying, hey, there's another report you need to get in addition to your due diligence report. And asset intelligence is I have a educational academy coming out called the Asset Intelligence Academy for asset managers and boots on the ground people. So I called it that report. Here are the 11 categories that you really want to make sure you're getting reports for and you have budgets for before you take over the property. And so we've already talked about some of these, but in the way they're organized, and I think it's very important how you organize these categories, is because they're organized by the contractor you're going to need to come out. Example, parking lot and walkways. You'll see on a due diligence report, they'll divide out the walkways into a different category on your report, and then they'll put the parking lot over here, and it's the same guy that's going to do both of those, so why not just give him that entire report? This is just all about being efficient. So, the same contractor that does parking lots does walkways, okay, but the important thing here is when we get to number 7 and down, none of those categories are in a basic due diligence report. So let's just think about this. Let's just say we got the due diligence report, we did what it said, and we got those numbers. Now here we are on day 1, walking on our property. We don't have budgets for amenities. That's such a huge part of the community. Safety and security, OpEx and convenience. So that's like trash, ongoing landscaping, maybe storage, branding and marketing. If you're about to take over a rough property and it's already got bad reviews, you're definitely going to want to rebrand. How much does that cost? Monument signs, and then marketing, like the building signs. Okay, and then last, we already talked about sustainability. So you can see there's a big chunk that you guys are going to have to do yourself. Somebody on your team is going to have to grab all this information. And I'll repeat this quite a lot today. If you don't budget for it during due diligence, and then you close on the property, where is this money going to come from? It's not going to happen. Unless the deal does really well and you have some extra money, but you're really tying your hands there. Okay. All right, so that wraps up the due diligence section. So let me pass it over to Aaron real quick, and then if you guys have any questions about that before we get into CapEx.
We're also filming this, by the way, professionally. Brandon brought in Francisco, correct?
Yes.
And he's filming this. Typically we've done Facebook Live, but this is going to be a higher quality presentation. I don't monetize these events, so anything I would do would be totally out of pocket. So we tend to Facebook Live them typically, but it will be filmed. I'm going to put it up public on my personal Facebook page, so whether we're friends or not, anybody will be able to go there and watch it. You'll be able to direct your friends to it, and that will be good. So.